I'm Tony and welcome to Tony Technology. I wanted to talk to you today about how a light bulb took over my house. So I've been playing around with the idea of getting smart lights in my house for a while, and I actually went through the process of buying a couple of them and changed all the lights in my house to use those. It's very exciting. But as with a lot of things with technology, it didn't stop there. It kind of just keeps going. So I wanted to take you through my journey and show you some of the things I've learned along the way. The first thing I did was I got hold of these B-Netter light bulbs. So they're a smart light bulb, they plug into a normal socket, they're LEDs, full RGB color control. The thing that actually sold me on these more than anything else is they go from warm white to cool white. So during the day, you can have your warm white if you're cooking, sorry, cool white. And if you're cooking and you want to actually see what your food looks like, you've got your cool white for that. And then as the evening gets later on, you can change to warm white. And so a couple other things, it just connects to your regular 2.4 gigahertz network, no hub required, and it comes with software to actually control it. Also advertised as working with Alexa and Google Home, which are really cool. And one of the other things, you can group these together to actually control them. So if you have 3 lights in your lounge, you can group those all together and you can control them with a single click via the app. One of the other things that snuck into my house was some smart Wi-Fi plugs. Mostly I was looking to monitor energy usage. I was looking to go solar at the time and I needed to get an idea of how much my power certain things in my house were using to get a better idea of what was the minimum solar system that I could get and put in place. Um, so very quickly after installing these, I had the apps up and running on my phone and it was great and I could control everything. But obviously, as always, there's the desire to have more control over it. And so that's when I came across Home Assistant, which you can install on pretty much any computer or a Raspberry Pi. So I've installed this on a Raspberry Pi 4, and this was to be able to bring all the smart equipment in my home together. So this has got really good getting started guides. I basically made it through this whole guide, got everything up and running, and eventually got to the point where I was running my own Home Assistant. This is what my page looks like, and one of the most amazing things that I find about Home Assistant is that it can do so much. Um, so some of the things that it does by default, I mean, even just having um, the weather in here, I've got a temperature and humidity sensor, which is off at the moment. I've got the lights in my house that I've set up. So we've got the counter light from the kitchen, as well as the actual kitchen light. I've got the dining room table, front door, and TV light. I've also got the smart plug for a stub fan and my office. So I can remotely see how much power my office is using. So as well as whether the device is on or off. And here's a passage light. Over here, it's kind of cool. You can see the color of the light and how it's set. So late at night, we've gone down to a low brightness and a warm temperature. So it's kind of removing that blue light. Being in South Africa, I've also connected up Eskom Push. So this is an app that lets us see what stage of load shedding we're at. For anyone who doesn't know, load shedding is like a city provided timetable that tells you when they're going to switch off the power in your area. There's a lot of other things that we can see. So the Eskom Push API is actually kind of new and they've got quite a quota on it for non-commercial usage, which I've luckily managed to stay within. And we can see that I'm in load shedding at the moment and load shedding is on. We can see Cape Town's at stage 5, which means they need to shed 5 megawatts of power to be able to let the grid stay up and everyone be able to process. We've also got the Eskom stage, so in me being in Cape Town, I'm at stage 5, and then the rest of the country is at stage 6. Some of the other things you might have seen in here. So I've got my a speed test running. And so this is one of the cool things about Home Assistant. You kind of just keep bringing things in here and then you start logging them together and you can start chaining them together to do certain things. So we can see here, I can see what my ping is over time. and if I want to know whether my ISP is providing me with the internet that I expect. So I can see that I was running at 250, 260 megs, and in my last test, this has dropped down to 213 megs. Maybe due to internet usage, basically anything over 200 or even 100 these days, I'd be fine, I don't mind. But it's nice to have this information and be able to dig into it if I want. So I can see here over the last day where we're looking at, so 180 megs was a bad one. This test runs every 3 hours. It's the same as if I go to speedtest.net and run it myself. One of the other things is I've got location tracking on my devices now. So think of like Google Maps tracking where you are and what you're doing. This is a similar thing, but it is actually running the Home Assistant app on my mobile phone and my wife's mobile phone, and it tells if we're at home or at another location. And so I've defined a whole bunch of places that we can or can't be. So it will be home if we're at home. That's a defined zone that I've set up on the map. And then I have like certain friends' houses and places that we often go, and this will change to reflect that. It doesn't actually store the location indefinitely. The actual GPS coordinates will store the history of the locations I went to. If it doesn't know where I am and I'm not at one of those locations, it'll mark me as away. So some of the integrations we'll see here more. This is the schedule for load shedding that's been pulled into here, and I can have this activate certain things and tell me about it. I also have energy usage, which is not showing right now. And so this is actually from an effigy power meter that I've attached up. It monitors my energy usage over the day. So going from just having the light bulb, I've moved up to all of this. And then one of the more interesting things that I've set up is I've set up these little widgets. So if I'm watching TV, I click this widget and it will change all the lights in my house to be optimal how I feel for TV watching, which means that it switches off all the lights in front of the couch. So I've got no lights coming straight at me, and then it leaves the lights on behind so that we get like a good backlighting. When we're cooking, like I mentioned earlier, we set all the lights to cool white, so it's that crisp white where you can actually see what you're doing. And then if we're chilling, we set all the lights to warm white and set them at 50% brightness. And if it's bedtime, we'll just click sleep, and then that's everything's off using the least electricity possible. So all of this I can control over the internet. I had to set up some forwarding on my router as well as a duck DNS server, DNS provider. So it updates my IP address and provides my Home Assistant into there, and I can access this on the internet and my mobile phone when I'm away from home. So it's quite cool that you can plug other smart devices in your house in. So this is a Google Home speaker that's been integrated. This is OSMC. It's a media center that I have running in the lounge on my TV. This is a ESP32 cam that I've hooked up. All the lights are off at the moment inside. And we've also got the LG Smart TV, which this was able to connect to, which is really cool. Because if I'm away from home and the TV happens to be on, I can actually switch it off, or vice versa if I wanted. Via OSMC, I can use the HDMI to switch on the TV, and I could make it play something if I wanted the house to be a bit noisier than it was. So I've mentioned a couple of things already. Hacks was one of the more interesting things. I'll get back to that in a moment, I think. So one of the other things I've got set up is I've got monitoring for my inverter and batteries and solar. When I installed all of this, it was pretty much a dumb system. It sits on the wall and it's got a battery hooked up to it, and I don't get any information out of it without going to a tiny LCD display, something similar to a tiny little block display on here. And then I can tune it and change settings on there. But I installed Solar Assistant on another Pi, and I was able to hook this up, and we can see over the day what my usage in the grid looks like. The red line is the grid power that's being drawn. The blue line is the load that's been put on everything on the inverter. and then we've got our yellow line that indicates how much solar power was being pulled in. You'll see this massive dip over here during the day. Generally, when the battery's charged up, it'll drop off the usage to just try and match as closely as it can to what your load is. And then if you do anything else, it will, like if you get a spike, then suddenly your solar will pick up again. But in general, most days kind of just have this symmetric sort of flow. Um, and so in this, I can see what my battery's sitting at. So we're currently in load shedding, great for us. And then I can see the battery usage and how much is left, the solar that came in for the day. And this is quite a fun system, which allows me to actually, instead of climbing into my roof, I can come in here, I can go to the settings, I can tell it if I want to edit a setting. So currently, with stage 5 load shedding, I will use whatever power is available at the time to charge the battery. But in general, I'm trying to do solar first most of the time. So currently it's set to utility first, just because I wanted to have the battery charged before load shedding came in, even though the power was kind of dying, solar was dying out at that point in the day. Um, so one of the more interesting things that I had to go through, so I mentioned that I bought these B-netter devices, and hooking them up to Solar Assistant wasn't actually possible using B-netter, which I found super interesting. So once you've downloaded the B-netter app, you add your devices to it, and you can view them in the app and control them. But actually, there's a massive company called Toya that I'd never heard about before, and they basically sell white labeled goods that you can put your own name on and pretty much launch within days, according to them. And so, luckily, these are just white labeled goods. They're not even hard coded to be only run on the BNetter platform. You can download the Toya app and add all these devices into it, which is really cool because Toya has their IoT platform. And once I registered for it and requested API access, I was able to get 6 months of API access for my devices in my home. And I will have to renew this every 6 months, which is a bit of a pain. But then the whole process was actually built into plugins inside of Home Assistant. So if we go into devices and services, I can see that I've got Toya set up here. I've got 11 devices, and they've got 18 entities between them. And this is pretty much driving all of the light integrations that I've got. You can see that I've got a DLNA media server that we spoke about earlier. The Google Cast is the Google Home in my house, as well as the LG Smart TV and the actual OSMC integration. So pretty much a lot of the things are configured with plugins that are readily available. So I've got the Sun plugin as well, which is kind of cool. So I can see the weather and speedtest.net. So the first thing that you have to tell most people about Home Assistant is not necessarily to do this one thing. It's about bringing all these different systems in your home together so that you can actually view your full usage in one place and then be able to start actually mapping automations between them. And so I don't have a lot of automations and scenes, but I have a pretty cool one, which I think is when ESCOM turns off, there's no real notification in our house about it. Unless you're using the microwave or the oven, it kind of just keeps running. So this was to see the power usage, and if my power usage in my house drops below 1, so 0 watts being pulled through the utilities, then it will check if the power usage is unavailable. So if it's not unavailable and it's not unknown, then I will use Google Speech to say that ESCOM power is off using my living room speaker. So this is kind of cool for a couple facts. The one, I'm using a power meter to determine whether ESCOM is on or off. I've then got conditions that can verify that the state is in a state that I'm interested in knowing about. So it is pulling the data and it is below 1, so 0. And then I can use an external service like Google Speech to create the MP3 to play on my living room speaker. So this is sort of like the integrations that you can do. Another one is when the power goes on. When the power goes off, there's certain devices in my house that I'd rather have off and not using any battery power. So I can switch the device off in that situation. I think this is broken at the moment. Um, and then we can switch the fan on again at a later stage as well. So when the power comes back on, switch this fan back on. There are other things you can do. So you can actually get webhooks where you can tell when certain criteria get met. You can send yourself notifications. So if you have devices turned on or off, or if a door is open and you have a sensor on the door, you can get a notification that someone opened the door to your property. One of the other things, I struggled for a while with this solar system program. It often disconnected from my inverter and my battery, so I installed a program called, not Hacks, it's AppDaemon. And AppDaemon allowed me to write a Python script which would log into Solar Assistant and go and disconnect and reconnect the COM ports. And then in most cases, that was good enough to get the Solar Assistant up and running again. And so you can see over here, I have a pretty good history of all my updates coming in. What was happening before was a kind of disconnect from one of the inverter or the battery, and then I'd lose some of the stats that I was trying to pull through, which was quite frustrating. But thankfully, uh, having a server running in my home kind of got me to the point where I could write a script to actually deal with that. Just trying to remember how to log into AppDaemon. There's an update for this. Let's see if we can open the web UI. And so this web UI, I've got a script called reconnect. Yeah, this wasn't the most intuitive when I started using it. I think I have to actually go edit files on the server to be able to do something with this. But the script called reconnect is run on an instance, and it will run every 5 minutes. I think I've set it to. So once it was set up and running, it was actually pretty easy and happy. If I get into my settings for Home Assistant, I believe I can find that file. So here is my solar.py. And you can see that this imports AppDaemon, and then it just goes through the process of connecting to my instance. Oh, now I can't do the stream. Let's close that. And so connected to the AppDaemon, that is very cool. And it will do what it needs to do, and then disconnect, and it will run every 5 minutes and keep me going. You've also got the opportunity to set up dashboards. I haven't set up anything really great yet. And then NFC tags around the house, which I'm quite keen on using at some point. So you could set up tags that when you scan them, they'll do certain things, which is actually quite cool. So being able to set up a tag in your kitchen that would change all the lights to certain settings, so you could have 5 different ones depending on what you're doing that could change your house, and anyone who could scan the QR code would be able to activate that tag. It's one way of doing something. The other is potentially getting smart buttons and hooking those in, and then those could hook up into here. What I like about this is like even with a smart home journey, like I can slowly add new components in, and I will check that they work with Home Assistant before. But even if they're all disparate, being able to bring them in one at a time will be wonderful because I'll be able to actually um, still integrate them all in the same place. So I'm not tied into using something specific. Like I'm not tied into only using BNetter devices now because I only want to use the BNetter app. Um, the other thing I can show is like I have integrated. So aside from having the um, integration for the inverter, I've also actually got my general power usage for my house, which I can view over here, and I can see that it's currently bringing in 0. It's got estimated spends for the month based on usage so far. And so this is really cool that I can see my total house's usage from a power clamp that I've hooked up in my home. But then I can also have that in line with what my inverter is seeing and using as me, which I'm quite excited about. So yeah, this was a super quick run through about how buying one light bulb took me on a amazing journey. It's not really a guide for using Home Assistant, but I think if you've ever wanted to have any sort of smart home devices in your home, then the smart way to go is potentially taking a look at Home Assistant and seeing if it might be right for you. There's some amazing plugins by amazing developers, and there's also Home Assistant Cloud, which if you don't want to go through the process of what I did of setting up your own DNS routing through your server and setting up a temporary DNS or dynamic DNS, then you can actually just pay Home Assistant Cloud and they'll manage that all for you and you'll have your cloud instance. There's some more things that I wanted to be able to do. You can actually integrate Home Assistant into Google Home. So then I'd be able to start telling Google Home to do things that would come through Home Assistant, and then I would be able to do whatever sort of flows I wanted, whether using app daemon where I could script it in Python, or actually just using the automations and scenes inside of Home Assistant, which are quite cool as well. Yeah, and thanks for joining me on my super quick journey here. If there's anything you'd like to know about this, or if you think I could help you with something, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Always happy to share what I've learned in my technology with anyone who's interested. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.